Okay, we will go on and dive in. Thank you all for being here today. We are so excited that you are joining us. So whether this is your first encounter with us or you're a current client and have been with us for a while, we're glad you're here. We have just wrapped up our Office 365 series that was a huge success. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to any of those, you can check those out at enableministry.com/webinars. It has all of our webinars listed there for some great content on how to really optimize your Office 365 packages for your team and your ministry. Before we do get started, a couple of housekeeping things to talk about. On the far right, you have the Q&A, so please put any questions you have there. We will get to them at the very end, so Andy will do a Q&A then. So, we'll respond and say, we got your question, but we will answer that at the end. And if we don't get to it at the end, we will post it on the landing page along with the webinar link. So you'll get an answer to your question. The other thing is you can pause the webinar at any time. Just use the icons in the bottom left of your screen. And let's see. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping. So today what we wanted to talk about is optimizing your church's technology on those busy holiday Sundays. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Andy. He has been at Enable for 3 years, I believe. And Andy, if you want to go, there you go to the next slide. This is Andy, and he has a ton of experience in the IT industry. You can see kind of all the different areas that he's worked with churches, and has been a strategy consultant, we call them StratCons, for nearly 3 years, and lives just outside Nashville with his family. So I'm so excited for y'all to be able to learn from his wisdom and be able to get some of his insight from some of the things that he's seen. So a couple things we're going to go over today, just once again, kind of focusing on the high. Oh, Andy, do you mind going to the next slide? Sorry. Thanks. So for some things that we're going to talk about is in the optimizing technology in the following areas: check-in, network and Wi-Fi, AV and streaming, and then Andy has a few extra things for us. And like I said, you'll also be able to do a question and answer with him at the end. So without further ado, Andy, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, thank you, Ellie. So we're going to go over all the fun things for your busy Sunday. So the first thing we're just going to dive into is check-in, which is the first step of things that come in whenever you have a full audience in your church on a busy Sunday. So regardless of if you check in for an adult or children, these are some of the things that you should consider are testing the machines, a plan and disbursement of where the machines are located, and making sure that your staff's trained and prepared and ready for the big influx in the holiday season and holiday Sunday that you're going to have. So when we talk about check-ins, there's several things we need to think about, and like how many machines we should put out, where we should put them. Do you have enough staff to operate them? The next few slides we'll go through, and you can see a kind of an in-depth detail of what we're looking at and what we try to think about when we're doing those busy check-ins. So first is we want to test the machines, right? So I am a big proponent for trust but verify. So oftentimes the check-ins are only powered up once a week, and then they put them into storage the rest of the time. So we want to make sure that the systems have been powered on and tested before a big service. Turn the systems on a few days before, and that'll help ensure that they're getting updates. You'll want to leave them on probably for a few hours. If you can leave them on for longer than that, it's usually a good idea. But make sure that you give it a reboot or two, that they are applying all the updates that they may have downloaded while they're sitting there. You want to ensure that they're working properly. Perform a quick test, verify printing, that the check-in application is working, that there's no glitches or anything like that. That's the time to really verify if you're going to have an issue, and then call support or troubleshoot it there before you actually put it into production, and you have to do that in the middle of thousands of people in your lobby. So that helps eliminate those issues. You'll want to run any software updates if that's applicable to your check-in or your church management that you have. Sometimes that's integrated with the operating system, but oftentimes that's a separate piece. Also, the big piece that we see from reported issues are printing problems. So if there are printer problems, this is a great time to discover them. Make sure that they have enough paper. So sometimes they won't have replaced the printer roll from the last week, and you'll have 3 labels, and then all of a sudden we got to find paper. So make sure that they're not printing strange characters on the labels. So run through the whole thing, and make sure that names are printing out properly. If people get a bunch of weird characters on their printer labels, they're probably not going to be real thrilled. And so just testing those machines and doing all of that maintenance up front is really helpful to making sure that everything's going to work properly on those days. The next thing we want to think about is planning and dispersing where the machines are going to be located. Where are you going to put the check-ins at? Oftentimes churches have a really big lobby or foyer area. Sometimes they have hallways that they try to traffic control people down. But when it's a busy service and everybody comes in, that's when the lobby gets really difficult to navigate. So ensuring a proper flow of people and location of the check-ins can help with that congestion. So consider adding additional check-in machines. Changing some of the locations of where they are, making sure that they're spaced out along in areas that people don't queue is a really helpful piece. If you're like me, I come into a busy Sunday, and if there's 1,000 people in the lobby, I want to run away. So I try to, queue as fast as possible, or go around the system if that's the case. So a lot of people have that tendency. So making sure that things are evenly spaced out, that there's a queuing in process. When you're spacing those check-in stations, one thing that we recommend is ensuring that they're hardwired. So having a wireless check-in on the system can lead to some performance issues when a large number of people come in. When they connect to the network in the building, they may have a smartphone and a smartwatch, and then their tablet that they're going to read their Bible from, and all of that stuff, if it connects to the wireless, can start slowing it down when hundreds and thousands of people come in all at the same time. So eliminating some of those factors by hardwiring the check-ins is going to be helpful for you, especially when there's that initial surge of people. The preparing and training of your staff is vital as well. So if you have volunteers, which most churches do, giving them sufficient training, showing them, okay, here's the check-in app, here's what I need you to do, here's how we run through those things to check people in, here's how you change the printer roll for paper when it runs out, because that's going to happen. And these are some of the common, problems that we see with them. Okay, well, every now and then this screen will go away. We need to reopen that up, and this is how you do it. So doing a kind of a quick, 30-minute, this is how you do everything in the check-in system, and making sure that they know what to do and how to do it in those types of situations is going to really be helpful. Having a greeter, or what I call a traffic controller, can help out in making queues so that they don't get too long, and having that kind of personable experience when you first come into a church, and just, somebody who's pleasant and nice and kind of can get you in the right order will make people like me not want to run away whenever we first come in and there's a whole lot of people. So doing that work to prepare the staff and volunteers, that's really going to help you transition through that first initial queue of everybody, and making sure that your check-in process is going to go well. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the network. So I have a degree in network engineering, so I like the network side of things. So I may get kind of nerdy on this. We'll dive a little bit into some of the terminology in how the network architecture is set up and designed. So bear with us. We'll do a Q&A at the end of this, but essentially network architecture is different for every church. So there's some basic components to it, but designing and implementing it can be different for everybody that we have. So you can break it into several categories to ensure performance. When we consult on network setup, one of the things that we often ask is, what are you trying to accomplish? So when we're trying to determine that, our network consideration is no different. If the intention on the network is going to be to live stream and do massive check-ins on Sundays, and then during the week just have standard office functionality, then there's a type of network architecture that needs to be adhered to really make that work and support really well. So the things to consider when planning for the big events. So the number one question is, do I have enough bandwidth? Did Comcast give me a big enough pipe for me to do all of the internet things that I need to do? The speed and type of that bandwidth is really important to be able to do those things. And if you don't have enough speed, oftentimes where we see a bottleneck is at the internet service provider level. But it's not always there, but oftentimes when you put everything on the network and you're going as fast and as heavy of a network traffic as you can, that's usually where we see the slowdown is, okay, do we have a big enough pipe? Is AT&T or Comcast or whomever giving us enough bandwidth to really do what we need to do? Those are things that we would consult with outside of the big Sunday. Sometimes those things don't move very fast. So those things are what you want to pay attention throughout the year to make sure that, okay, when I do this type of event, everything kind of slows down at the internet level. And those are things that Enable can help you assess and diagnose and make sure that you're getting a cost-effective internet service as well as, adequate bandwidth for what you need to do. Do all my chickens have a wired connection where applicable? So that goes back to that wired connection when everybody comes into your church. Wired connectivity is faster than wireless connectivity. There's less interference. The speed's more consistent. With wireless, you're looking at a radio signal that sometimes can drop, especially when multiple people connect to it. Wireless connectivity can be impacted with that amount of traffic, like I said, with those people coming in. So it depends on how many access points you have and how many people are on the access points, and then what they're doing on those access points are all factors. So anytime we have a check-in, we always recommend having a hardwired connection to it. So it kind of mitigates some of those connectivity issues you may see from wireless. Traffic shaping. So is the traffic shaped to improve performance? So what's traffic shaping and what's network optimization, right? So those are the big questions from a networking standpoint of, okay, well, they said traffic shape, but what does that mean? So those are network features that allow you to prioritize network traffic. So you can say anybody on guest or anybody on staff gets priority, anybody on guest gets what's left. So that lets our media team, that lets the check-ins, that lets the people doing any kind of administrative tasks, they will have priority if it's shaped properly. And the people who are on the guest, they're guests, so they're not part of the production of the Sunday service. So they can use it to do some other things, but we want to make sure that the priority is really centered around those staff individuals so they can do their jobs. You can define that traffic and you can set that priority from a couple of different ways. You can do it from your firewall, from your switches. You want to make sure that you're weighing those trade-offs and benefits. And if you have guest access that may require, more performance and things like that, that's something you want to consult with your technical staff to make sure that you're setting the priority appropriately, and that if it is functional for a guest, it's adequate and it's available for them to do it in the shaping perspective. So segmenting network and portioning bandwidth for guests versus operation needs. So that question becomes, should I segment the network traffic? As we've covered, traffic shaping is a great tool to secure bandwidth for those key functions. It also allows for a security mechanism to limit certain traffic from getting to other parts of the network. For instance, it isn't wise to allow guest traffic to have the same network access as staff traffic. So that could cause a breach in security. If your guests can somehow access the file shares, that's no good for anybody. So making sure that the network is segmented appropriately to limit the guest access to just get to the internet or get to the giving app and get to the things that they need to get to, and make sure that the staff is secured and segmented away from that type of traffic. So AV and streaming. So media departments are one of the biggest users of the IT resources and the bandwidth that are in a network. So they have some of the largest requirements with IT teams. We work very closely with any media departments to give them everything that they need and to make sure that they're not killing the network with what they're trying to do. the amount of information that they're trying to process can really take a toll on a network if they're doing a lot of live streams, if they're, you know, doing a lot of media and sound checks and lighting checks and things like that. Those types of things we want to make sure don't impact the check-in situation, as well as can give the appropriate amount of resources so that they can do those live streams and not have a lot of glitches and hangups with those types of things. So we'll look at some things that you want to consider in working with the AV team and making sure streaming goes successfully. And the first thing I will say, like I said earlier, is trust but verify. So we want to test it. I can't tell you how many times I have come into a situation and as if we had only tested it just that last time, we would have known, hey, that doesn't work. We need to fix it again, you know. Performing a trial run of live stream is paramount to operating well. So if you don't let that big Sunday first time stream be happening literally for the first time, it's going to fail. You want to confirm with the IT department that traffic shaping and segmentation is working appropriately. It's that trust but verify again. Gradually increase that load of live stream when you do test. So what I recommend is have a pilot group, set that pilot group to make sure that the live stream works. Once the pilot works and you've done the proof of concept and everything's working there, what I would do is gradually increase the load of the live stream. So then you kind of know what kind of capacity you have. If it's 50 users, if it's 100, if it's 200, those are the types of things that we want to test with. Sometimes you can't get 50 volunteers to really test a live stream, but having the proof of concept and then having it under load is really a good test to verify how that streaming service is going to operate. And then tune it once it's done. Once you proof of concept, once you've tested it and you've got to tweak some things, that's something that needs to happen afterwards. If you're sending all your media out with 4K resolution, well, maybe 1080p will work. How many people are going to need to use that 4K resolution? So those are just things that can impact the network and can cause some other issues. Pre-service prep and AV checklist. So we want to make sure that they have a list of all the things that they've got to do beforehand. Lights, sound, video, network. We have some examples coming up, but those are just some of the things that they should think about before going into it. Backup plan. So let's play the game of worst case scenario. So say the lighting stops or the live stream stops playing. What are the secondary and backup plans that you're going to have in place to do that? Do you forego that? One of the things that I do in the church that I attend is I do song lead in our choir, and I also set up all of the media stuff that we have going on. So that's the monitors and the sound booth and the presentation. So after I do my vocal sound check, I go back there and turn everything else on. So I make sure that they are doing all those things, and I do that through a checklist of items that I have that we need to do for those services. If things go wrong and say a monitor goes out, well, we turn both monitors off. So those are the types of contingencies that you should think about and think through, is have a good backup plan. The same thing applies to check-in as well. So it's not likely, but sometimes paper check-in is the backup plan, so that's one thing that is helpful in any kind of scenario is, to having that contingency. Secondary connections, streaming. So what we're thinking about on that is having a secondary internet connection is really helpful due to a couple of things. You can dedicate a secondary internet connection to be just for your guest traffic, if that's the priority. You can also have a secondary connection just for your streaming traffic, if that's the priority. Having that secondary connection can also act as a backup connection in the event that the first one goes down. So there's a lot of different ways to design and implement a secondary connection, and it's really a good idea to have if the requirement of that service is really high, or if the design or need fits that type of architecture. So here is the pre-service checklist example that we have. And so keep in mind, these will be available to you when you receive the webinar recording. So you can download these, you can tweak them. Our friends at Brentwood Baptist, the media department, we're able to give some of their examples. So they're pertinent to them specifically, but I felt these are really good examples to kind of see some of the things that you want to do from a check-in perspective. So as you see here, create a new show file based on last week's file, assign the following channels and faders to certain mics that they have there, remove any temporary channels so that you're not getting feedback, confirm and test all the vocal groupings, adjust the vocals as needed, and then at the end of it, you have a, sign here so that you can verify that you did it. So when you didn't do it, we can come back and say, hey man, why didn't you check that mic? So those are some of the things that you have from a pre-service checklist. The next one here are specific for technical things that they look at. So they make sure that they unlock the door so people can get into the booth. They power on the TVs, they turn on the lights, they move the trash can. I guarantee somebody at some point didn't move that trash can and it got knocked over, and now it's on the checklist. So they check it every time. So power on all your devices and make sure that all the computers log in, make sure the projectors are coming up, and do all these things beforehand. And they even have, what I like about this is a time frame of when those things need to occur. So that's really helpful so that okay, by 7:30, all these things should be done. And if they're not done, okay, what's the backup plan? So those are some checklist examples. Like I said, they'll be in the webinar recording whenever you guys get that. So miscellaneous things to think about. You can include guest volunteers in your Teams channel is one of the things I don't have on this bullet, but that is something that's really helpful to communicate with your volunteers. So think about that as you're doing communications. Giving apps and websites, test and troubleshoot those apps beforehand. At the church I attend, I have a giving app, and so I always do my giving before service. So that way, if something happens with it, say the credit card on file is wrong or the site's down or something like that, I know before we go into the service, and I can try to troubleshoot it if I can, or at least notify the staff that, hey, this is down today, let's take the slide out that says, hey, text to give, those types of things. Traffic, where are these people going to park, right? So if you have a big Sunday service, traffic coordination is a big thing. I know our friends at Brentwood Baptist have a whole designation of how they do traffic when they're having a big event or a big service. So it is definitely something to think about in those big service Sundays. Security, so where they're going to park and who are they? So nobody likes to think about what would happen if an event happens, but making sure that your congregation is safe is one of the highest priorities. Adequate security and emergency plans are good to have. There are network components that interact with those things, such as cameras, door access control, intrusion prevention. Making sure that key locations stay locked is very important. So IT rooms, any kind of control rooms, secured areas like administrative offices. Being able to monitor the events is helpful. So having either a security personnel on point or on staff that can kind of monitor, especially in those big events. They're all things you should consider. You should consider them in a daily operation, and then make sure that there's a good process. And when you have a higher influx of people and guests, that you have a well-defined, laid-out process for security. So those are the things that we think about outside of the direct purview of IT, but definitely have an impact on it. So my next slide is what everybody's waiting for, are questions. Are there any questions about anything that you guys saw on the webinar here? Anything for me that you may have?
Andy, thank you. First of all, thank you for putting that together. Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. Sorry, hold on. Let me see if I can fix that. There we go. Okay, we did get a couple questions, so let me read those to you. Let's see. First one we have a lot of visitor check-ins on Christmas. So what is the most efficient way to handle those visitors so that it doesn't bottleneck at the check-in? And I'm assuming because they really don't know what to do, don't know how to sign in, that kind of thing.
Sure, I think having a greeter is awesome for new people. So that gives them a personal approach from the church perspective of there's a live person. You're not just a number. You're not just going in and signing a thing and attending. Um, but having that greeter there to kind of give them direction. Hey, my name's Andy. Welcome to the church. Thanks for coming. Here's a couple of quick details. If you don't mind, let's get you signed up as a guest. And if you want to continue serving here or going here, we can sign you up as a member later on. But here are the things that you need to know. Here's how we do some things. Here's how you get your kids checked in. Here's where they go. Here are the different events that we have going on today. And if you have any questions, come back and see me, or here's another person that you can go talk to. It really gives them a more welcoming experience when coming in. So.
That's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, another question we had is, what do you advise for internal communication within the team? Like if, for example, if something were to go wrong on Sunday morning, what's the fastest way to communicate a change to the entire staff?
So oftentimes when we see really big events, there's security personnel or their staff that have walkie-talkies. So those are really helpful. Almost everybody has a cell phone today. So knowing who kind of controls certain areas, so the greeter, the security guard, the people manning the check-in stations, having a group message isn't always the best thing. If you can have walkie-talkies, those are usually really good. But otherwise, cell phones are a decent way of communicating between those groups.
Okay, great. Do we have
channels are good too, because I know that's probably the answer you want, but that's sometimes difficult if you're not in front of a computer.
That makes sense. Perfect. Well, those are all the questions we have. If you have any more before we close up, feel free to type those in. If not, you can always email us. Andy, that was awesome. I learned a lot, and I hope that for all you guys, this was helpful as you gear up for these busy holiday Sundays. So just to wrap things up, Andy, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Perfect. So you can get in touch with us here. Here's all of our contact information. And please stay tuned for details for our next webinar that we're going to do in January, Security Do's and Don'ts. So our very own Melody will be doing that. She's our not strategy consultant. She's a CRM and our managing director of our Dallas office. And she's going to tell us some security best practices. So you'll want to tune in for that. And again, be on the lookout for an email with the link to the recording and your questions tomorrow. And we wrapped up a little early today, so you have about 30 minutes just to go and chill. So Andy, thank you again for taking the time to prep for this. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one.